In this series, we'll learn how to create single-page applications using ASP.NET Core and JavaScript services. Let's see what we need to know beforehand. So if you're having familiarity with .NET Framework, it is advantageous to you. A bit of JavaScript and HTML and C#, knowledge about React, Angular, Knockout or Vue. You don't need to know everything, but if you are aware of React or Angular or Knockout or Vue, then definitely you will be at ease in this course. And then SQL Server. So you need to know how to create a database, how to insert records, how to delete record, basically performing all the CRUD operations. So these are the prerequisites that you should be having in order to create a single page application using ASP.NET Core and JavaScript services. More on this in the next lecture. Now that we know what are the core building blocks of ASP.NET SPA project, we'll take a look at how to set up our dev environment. The first thing that you do is install Visual Studio 2017 or 2019. If you have Visual Studio 2019, then .NET Core framework is automatically installed. If you're using Visual Studio 2017, you can install .NET framework by visiting this link over here. So you can follow this guide to download the .NET Framework Core version. You can read it over here, .netmicrosoft.com/download/.NET Core 2.0. Now once you have Visual Studio 2017 or 2019, in case you're missing this as well, then you have the option of downloading it as well from this page, visualstudio.microsoft.com/downloads, and you can go with the community edition. The next thing that you need to ensure is Node.js is installed, and to download and install it, you can follow this link, nodejs.org download. And finally, in order to work with databases, you need to have SQL Server Management Studio and SQL Server Database, and that you can do from this link over here. So you can do a Google search, and from there you can obviously get this link and easily download it and install it on your system. So once that is done, we are done with our setup, and in the next one we'll see how we can create a sample project using all these tools. In this lecture, we'll take a look at how to create a single page application project using ASP.NET Core and React. So the first thing that we'll do is open up Visual Studio 2019, click on continue, click on create a new project, and once you do that, you'll see this window coming up. Here you need to select this ASP.NET Core application, and once you have done that, you need to select this one, ASP.NET Core Web Application. Here you can see it provides templates for single page applications using Angular, React or React plus Redux. Now just click next and choose a directory where you want to have this application created. I'll be putting it over here, and the name of the project will be SPA, that is single page application. Let's go ahead and click on create now. Once you do that, you'll be asked to choose the template. So here we'll be creating a project template for creating ASP.NET Core application with React.js. This is what we'll be selecting, and then we'll click on create, and this is going to scaffold a new project for us. And here you can see it has created the application. Let's go ahead and try running it once the restoration has been completed. As you can see over here, restore completed in 7.16 seconds. And let's go ahead and try running it on IIS Express. And here you can see the application is up and running now. Now let's go ahead and try creating a similar application, but this time we'll be creating it using the command line interface. In order to work with the command line interface, you first need to launch the command prompt like I've done over here. You can just go ahead and type cmd to launch the command prompt. Once you have done that, you need to go into the directory where you want to create the application. For instance, in my case, it's this directory SPA, and I'm inside that directory now. What you can do is you can type .NET new in order to find out what are the templates available and their short names and the languages as well. So here, as you can see, we have already created one using ASP.NET Core with react.js. In case you wanted to create it using command line interface, you would have done something of this sort. .NET new and then the short name React. Make sure that you specify space. So it's .NET new and then the short name. Using this, you can create a new project inside the directory, and then you can obviously open it up in Visual Studio 2019 like we have done over here. In case you don't have Visual Studio 2019-2017, you can also make use of Visual Studio Code, and there you'll have to ensure that you have the .NET Core installed, and using the command line interface in Visual Studio Code editor, you can create a single page application project. But I would recommend you to install either 2019 or Visual Studio 2017. In this lecture, we'll be exploring the file structure of the project that we created in the previous lecture. Over here, you can see there's a file called startup.cs. Now, this is responsible for setting up the pipeline of the project, and here you'll find implementation of a dependency injection pattern. The first thing that it does is over here, if you notice, configure services. So if you're running it in production version, it will be creating a directory inside this client app folder, and everything will be published inside the build directory. If it is being served from the debug environment or development environment, in that case, client app directory will be used for serving the files. Now here, you can see that if it is a development environment, we are making use of developer exception pages. Otherwise, in production, we'll be showing error pages. Here we have made use of HTTPS redirection, use of static files, and single page application static files. This is the default route that we have defined, and this is the directory which hosts the single page application. Now, program.cs is the entry point. So here you'll notice this main method gets called, and when it is being called, you can see it is calling internally create web host builder method, and create host builder method has got this create default builder, which is internally using the startup class that we just explored. Apart from that, you'll also find static pages and files like app settings.json. So here you'll have all the settings related to the web application or single page application. Configuration settings, we have pages over here. So this one is the partial control view imports. Then we have error.cs HTML and CS page. Apart from that, we also have a controller, which is sample data controller. So this is the API controller, which is currently being used to demonstrate fetching data from the server. And as mentioned, this is the client app directory, which has got all these files. So here we have components, counter, fetch data, home.js, layout, nav menu, app.js, and this is the SCSS file, and this is the public directory, which has got the assets like favicon.ico file, index.html. Let's open it up, and here you can see this is the template index.html file. If I run this one in browser, this is what you get to see. Let's go ahead inside the elements tab, and here you'll notice the page that is being generated. And if I show you the index.html page, these are the comments that you can see now coming up when the site is running. Here we have the styles coming up, and similarly the body tag, and then the div id root. So this root as well is defined over here, and every content that you see inside this div root is being generated and inserted over here. So this is the div now, navbar and div. Now some of the contents that you see is coming from this file called app.js and index.js. So let's open up app.js, and as you can see, it is returning a layout, and layout has got 3 routes over here. First is the home, then counter, then fetch data, and internally you can see we are taking the root element and then we are rendering this root element. Internally, once the root element is rendered, it is going to call this, and it is further going to display these pages. So we have home, counter and fetch data. When we say home, this is the file which gets called, home.js, which is going to return this particular div, and that is what we are currently seeing when we are running this application, as you can see over here. Now if I go and click on fetch data, let me take you to the network tab, and here if I click on fetch data, you'll see this method gets called sample data weather forecasts, and this one is defined inside this controller that we're talking about, sample data controller weather forecast, and this is what it is returning right now over here. Similarly, if I click on this counter, you can see it's just loading the view. There's no server-side request, and here this is the file that gets called counter.js, and you can see that once we are clicking on this button, on click event is being called, the increment count method is called, and then it is setting the state of this variable current count by incrementing it to 1 every time. And here you can check it out. So that was a quick explanation about the file structure of the single page application that we created using ASP.NET Core and React library. In this lecture, we'll be taking a look at how to create a single page application using ASP.NET Core and Vue.js library. Now, as we know that Visual Studio 2019 does not provide a built-in template for creating single page applications using Vue, what we'll be doing over here is we'll be launching our command prompt, and inside the code directory we will be first of all installing all the templates which is provided by the .NET framework. In order to do that, we need to type in this command, and the command is .NET new, then -- install, and here we have Microsoft.ASP.NET Core Spa templates. Press enter, and over here, once it has installed all those templates, you will be able to see the one which we want to create. So here we have ASP.NET Core with Vue.js, and the short name is Vue. So in order to create a template, what we'll be doing over here is we'll say .NET new and then Vue. Now this is going to create a default project. So before that, let's create a directory. Now inside this directory we'll be creating the project .NET new Vue. Press enter, and here you can see the template ASP.NET Core with Vue.js was created successfully, and it is running some post creation actions now. And here you can see the directory is also being shown, spare Vue, and if you click on this, you can see all the files being generated right now using the command line. And now that we are done with the project creation, what we need to do next is run npm install as suggested by this guide. So here we'll be going and saying npm install, press enter. Now once that's done, you need to click on this, you need to type this npm audit and press enter over here. So basically what we have done after creating the project is installed all the dependencies that were required for the project to run, and after that, as suggested, we have run this command npm audit. So it has you can see found 37 vulnerabilities, and out of that 8 are moderate and 12 are high. So we'll be just doing that, npm audit fix, and press enter now. So audit basically gives you all the vulnerabilities that are there, and then when you run this command npm audit fix, it tries fixing out all these vulnerabilities automatically. And once that's done, you need to close your command prompt, and here inside the project directory you can just go ahead and launch this csproj application. Open it up in Visual Studio IDE, and here you can see the structure is exactly the same what we reviewed in the previous lecture. Apart from that, you'll just notice one extra file over here, that is webpack.config.js. Let's open it up and see it. So this webpack.config.js file basically holds all the webpack settings, and it in summary has a list of all the files that it is going to compile. This includes the JavaScript file or the TypeScript files. Now let's go ahead and see other files that are created. So here we have views, and these are the files created. A controller, so this one comes with an additional home controller, and then we have the client app, and here we have app, and then counter, fetch data, home. So if you compare it from a React, you will see that these counter, fetch data, and home all are created inside a separate directory, whereas in React, if you look, it was just inside a components directory. So components was having everything counter, fetch data, home, but in Vue this is all separated into different directories. Now let's go ahead and run this one to see it in action. And there you go, you have this single page application template created. It has got this home, then we have counter, which is going to increment, and then we have fetch data, which is going to show some mock data related to temperature. And that is pretty much it about the single page application created using Vue.js library. In the next lecture onwards, we'll be making use of the React library to create our sample single page application. JavaScript services in ASP.NET Core are a collection of client-side technologies. It primarily consists of Webpack and Node services. Webpack is responsible to build client-side resources, whereas Node services are used to run JavaScript on the server side. Node services and sparse services together forms the part of ASP.NET Core JavaScript services. As mentioned, Node services are used to run JavaScripts on the server side, whereas sparse services are used to create single-page applications. Now, Node services primarily runs in the server. So we'll have our controller where the controller method will be calling a server-side JavaScript file, and it will be performing the operations on the server and then returning the result back to the client. This JavaScript file, which will be executed on the server, will actually run inside the Node.js environment, and this is something which we will be exploring now. Here what we have to do is, in startup.cs file, first of all we have to register our services. So we'll say services.add node services. Once that is done, we'll be creating a server-side.js file. Now here you can see that first of all we are saying module.exports because this is how we need to create it as a module. So this module is having a function, and this is having callback, and then the two parameters that will be passing. What we are doing is we are multiplying these two parameters and then creating this result variable. And after that we are making a callback. Now the first parameter over here is for errors, so we don't have any errors, that's why we are passing null. And then the next parameter is result itself, so we have passed the result variable over here. And that's pretty much it, what we need to do in our server-side.js file for now. After this we'll be creating a function in our sample data controller. So here you can see that sample data controller, we've created this method called server result, and here we have passed this inode services. So the services that we have registered in startup.cs will be passed over here as a parameter, and using that service we are calling a server-side.js file that we just now created. So this file will be called from the server, and these are the two parameters x and y. So multiplying them will yield the result as 72, and that is what this result variable will hold. And finally we are returning it as a JSON data back to the function which called it. So in order to display this result, what we have to do is go inside our home.js file. So here we have the home.js file, and in the constructor, as you can see, we have made use of the fetch API to call this method server result, and whatever response is coming as a JSON data, we have stored it over here in the response and then passed it to the data. And once we have the data, we are storing it in the result state. Here you can see these are the two states that we defined, result and loading. Initially loading is set to true, and at that time we'll be showing a text saying loading, and once the data is there in the state, we'll be showing that data. And this is what we are doing over here. So we have created a content variable, and based on the status of the loading state, we are either showing loading text or the result itself. Now if we just run this in the browser, here you can see that it says result from server as 72. Now let's press F12 and go to network tab, and here I'll be reloading this page now. You can see the result is 72. Now if you see the server result call that we have and the response, this is what we are getting from the server, result from server as 72. So that is how you can make use of node services in ASP.NET Core web applications. In the previous one, we explored node services. Now in this one, we'll be exploring sparse services. Sparse services are primarily used when you're creating your single page applications using ASP.NET Core and client-side languages or libraries like Angular or Vue. So over here, you can see that what exactly it provides is a Webpack dev middleware. It also gives you hot module replacement that is a part of Webpack itself, and it is also responsible for server-side pre-rendering and routing helpers. Now routing helpers are for both client as well as server. Now this Webpack dev middleware is responsible for streamlining the whole development process. It builds client files like TypeScript or less or SCSS files, and you do not require to run Webpack manually or set up any file watchers. That is something which Webpack automatically does, and it always sends the updated information or the build output to the browser. So here, when we are creating the single page application using AngularJS or Vue, so in this example, we'll be exploring the single page application that we created using the Vue template. So let's go ahead and see how Webpack actually works. So here you can see that we have opened the template app, spa view, and here inside startup.cs file, you'll notice this line that we have, app.use Webpack dev middleware. Now if I go ahead and comment out this, or let's cut it out altogether from here and save this file, and now run this application. So here you can see the application is running now. Let's go ahead in our spa view and here open up the files. Inside the client app directory, we have this component, and here we have the home file. So we'll open up homeview.html, and here we'll just add one more exclamation mark and save this now. So this file is being saved currently, and in the browser you don't see that happening automatically. Now let's go ahead and reload this page. Still you can see that you don't have the updated content over here. Now let's go back and stop this. Go to startup.cs file now, and here let's undo this and have our Webpack dev middleware enabled. Now go ahead and run this, and now you can see that the updates are coming up. Let's go ahead and update it further one more time. So back in our homeview.html, let's add one more exclamation mark, save this file, and now go back to the browser, and here you can see without even refreshing the page, you're able to see the content being updated over here. So that's one of the use cases of Webpack dev middleware which it provides, and we have explored that in this lecture. Now you must be wondering why web dev is not required with React and it is required with Vue and Angular templates. But the reason is, if you closely look at the startup.cs file of a React template, over here you will find out that it is making use of its own React development server, whereas with Vue you don't see that happening. So here you can see the app.use MVC code block is there, And that is what we have over here in React as well. But after that, we are also making use of this user spa, which is something missing in Vue. And that is where web dev middleware comes into picture. And that's the reason why we need it in templates like Vue and Angular, but not in React. In this lecture, we'll be exploring server-side pre-rendering. In order to explore server-side pre-rendering, the first thing that we need to do is install this package called npm install, then this command save ASP Net pre-rendering. Once you have installed it into the project, like over here, I've done it with the single page application using Vue template. You can proceed with server-side rendering after that. So once installed, the next thing that we need to do is inside our home controller, you can see I've created this method called server pre-rendering, and it's just returning a view. So what I've done is over here inside views home, you can see server pre-rendering.cshtml page has been created. Now inside this, you will notice a couple of tags, for instance ASP pre-render module and ASP pre-render data. Now pre-render module refers to a JavaScript file, and pre-render data is basically used to pass parameters to the JavaScript file. So here you can see that I've created a server pre-rendering JS file, and here the first thing that I'm doing is calling the ASP Net pre-rendering module, which comes from the package that we just installed. Using that, we can just go ahead and say pre-render create server render, and here you can see this that we are processing the result now with params.data.x. X was the value that we passed from this page, and then y as well. So we are multiplying it and then concatenating the whole result string into this result variable. And finally we are returning a promise. Promise basically accepts resolve and reject. Over here we are sending this data as resolve, so HTML and then the result. Now once that's done, you can save this and you can go ahead and execute this now. And over here, as we know that the controller was defined inside home method, so here we'll say server pre-rendering and press enter. And here you can see the result is coming up, pre-rendering result, and the value is coming as 9. You can see this is being called. Server pre-rendering was the controller name. There's a spelling mistake over here. So you can see that using server-side pre-rendering, we are able to execute few data points using a JavaScript file on the server side itself and then return the result back to the client. In this lecture, we'll be taking a look at what will happen if we provide a URL which does not exist in the application at all. For instance, React takes care of that thing automatically, and for templates which makes use of Vue or Angular, there we have to make use of this option which is called as map spa fallback route. So here you can see we have given it a name, and then it defaults to this controller home with the action as index. So when we created the application using Vue template, this controller was also created, and here you can see this is the default view that will be returned. Now let's go ahead and execute this and see it in action. So this is the Vue template that gets generated, and if we try accessing some of the URLs, for instance this URL does not exist, and you'll see that currently it's showing you this blank page because it is currently redirecting using the map spa fallback route. Now if I just stop this and comment it out, and now if I type the same URL which we did earlier, you'll notice that it is now returning in 404 error. And this thing is automatically taken care of in templates which were created using the React language. So here, let's stop this now and uncomment it. And let's go to the React application, and here you don't see that thing at all. But if you run this application now, and here you try accessing a URL which does not exist, it will by default take you to the default route. So here you can see no content is coming, but the header bar is appearing. Just like in the Vue template, the sidebar was coming up. In this one, it has been moved as a header. So that's where you're getting it. So in both these places, you can see that if you want to handle URLs which does not exist in the application route, then you can either use map spa fallback route if you are making use of Vue or Angular templates, or if you are with React, then you're already covered for that scenario. In this lecture, we'll be taking a look at how to create a web application which will perform CRUD operations using our ASP.NET Core React Spa web application. For that, first of all, we will create a database in MS SQL and how to create a table as well inside that database. Once we have done that, we will be exploring how to connect that database to our ASP.NET Core React single page application. So in order to create a database, you must first of all install MS SQL and Management Studio. Once you have done that, you can just go and select database in MS SQL Management Studio. Over here, just select new database, and then a form will appear where you just have to enter the name of the database and click on OK. As you can see, I've already created a database called Skill Bakery over here, and inside that we have this table folder. Just right click on that to create a new table. Here you can specify the column name, data type, and whether that column is going to contain null values or not. You can also specify whether that column needs to be a primary key or not. So over here you can see that I've created a customer table. It has got these columns: customer ID, name, address, state, city, country, and email. Customer ID is the primary key and the data type is integer. Over here you can see for customer ID we have identity specification set to yes, and the increment value is 1 and identity seed is 1. Identity seed means the initial value when the record will be inserted in the database will be set to 1, and further it will increment by 1 every time you insert a new record. So once we have created our table and database, let's move ahead to our single page application that we created. Here you'll find this file called appsettings.json. Now inside this file you'll need to write this code to connect to the database. So you can see configuration is coming up, and inside that we have the connection string. Connection string takes few things like server, database, and username and password as well. But here, since we are using Windows login, we don't need to specify those, and we can just specify the server, database, and trusted connection is equal to true. Now over here, in order to find the server, what you can do is in your Management Studio, you'll find when you'll select this database, right click on it and go to properties. Here you'll find view connection properties. Just click on that link and then you'll get to see the server name. So you just need to copy this and paste it over here as server name. Database name you're already aware of, Skill Bakery, and then trusted connection equals true. So this is what we need to specify in our appsettings.json file to ensure that we'll be able to connect to the database using this connection string in our ASP.NET Core React single page application. More on this will be coming up in the next lecture. Now in this lecture, we'll be taking a look at how we can connect to database and fetch some records and show it in our ASP.NET Core React single page application. So over here, what I've done is I've created this customer table in the previous lecture, and now I've inserted some records over here like John and Matt. These are the customers that we have in the table, and what we'll be doing now is that we'll be showing this data in our application. To do that, first of all, open up your application. And the next thing that we need to do is create a customer class. So for this, you'll notice the structure that we have been following is over here. We have model. Inside the model directory, we have customer.cs. So this class basically mimics the database structure: table, customer ID, name, address, city, state, country, email. Now, once we have done that, what we are doing next is we have created a controller called customer controller. Now, inside this customer controller, we have followed the same route that we have over here for sample data controllers. So exactly like that, we have created this one. And you can see that the only difference in this one is that it is reading data from the database, and in order to do that we have to get the configuration setting that we made in our app settings.json file. So here, configuration, const string and all. Now to cover all these things, what we have done is, you'll notice we have included these three things: Microsoft.extensions.configuration, using which we'll be able to read the settings from app settings.json. Then we have system.data and SQL client to read data from the database, and here we have included the spa.model because there we have created the customer class. Now once that's done, what we have done next is created a variable called iConfiguration, which is going to store the settings information from app settings.json file, and then inside the constructor of this controller we have initialized it. So here we are initializing it. After that, you can see this is the method that we have created called customers, and here the route is customers. So it's like API/customer/customers. That is how we'll be calling it from the address bar of the browser. Next, what we are doing is we are going and getting the connection string. So here you'll see that we are saying config.getSection, configuration, and then const string. And that is what we have over here in app settings, configuration, and under that we have const string. So this is what we will be retrieving over here, saying .value. So now we got the connection string. Next, we have created a list of customers, and then using SQL connection, we are now going to query the database. So here we are saying create an instance of SQL command, open it up, provide the query and the connection string, then create SQL data reader, and while there is record in the reader, keep on reading, and once all the records have been read, we can just add it to the customers collection. So here we created the customer class and assigned the values respectively to all the attributes of the customer class, and then finally we are returning customers. Now there's one more way of doing this same thing using entity relationship model diagram that also we'll try to cover up in the upcoming lectures. Now let's go ahead and run this in the browser to see the output. And here you can see we are calling it as API/customer/customers, and then we are getting the results over here. Customer ID and name, address, city, state, country, email. Similarly for Matt as well, we are getting this information over here. So that is how we connect to database and retrieve records from the database using ASP.NET Core and React template. In this lecture, we'll be taking a look at how we can display the data from the API on our web page using the React template. So the first thing that we have done over here is we have made a bit of change. That is, we are now returning iAction result, and over here at the bottom you can see we are returning a JSON data set. That's a return JSON, and then we are passing the list customers over here. So that being said, the next thing that we are doing is over here in app.js, you can see we have said import customers from components customers, and this customers component we have created inside this directory src components, and then we have this customers.js. Now we'll be coming on to this one in a moment. After importing, the next thing that we are doing is we are adding it to the route collection over here, as you can see. So this is the path which will invoke this component customers that we have created inside the components directory. Now next thing that we are doing is inside our navmenu.js file, we have added one more nav item. So customers will now be part of the header bar, and there when you'll click on this customers link, it will be taking you to the customers route, and from there it will call the customers component. Now coming to the customers component, you'll notice that we have a state attribute where we have a collection customers and loading, and then we are calling the customers list using the fetch API. So we are saying API customer customers, and soon we receive the data, we are assigning the customers state, and then we are also updating loading to false. Here at the bottom you'll see we have a render method, and this render method is basically checking whether the loading is set to true or false. If loading is false, then we'll be calling this customers.renderCustomers table, and this is the state that we are passing as parameter to this method. Now inside this method, you'll notice we are generating a table, and this table basically contains all these columns: name, city, state, country, email, and then the state that we have passed will contain the collection of customers, and we are mapping through it, and each row will be printed with the values like name, city, state, country, email. You'll notice that the key attribute has been assigned as customer ID. The key attribute needs to be unique, and that's the reason we have assigned customer ID as key value to this row. Now when we'll be running this one, you'll notice that this is the result that is appearing. So you can see name, city, state, country, email, and if I go and inspect this out, this is how the rendered HTML looks. So that's how we display the data using our API from the database. In this lecture, we'll be taking a look at how we can select a specific record and edit that record. So here you can see the customers list, like John and Matt are coming over here, and now we have introduced a button called edit. Clicking on edit will basically show me the details of this particular customer, and after that we'll be able to edit them. So what we're trying to do is, let's click on this edit, and here you can see it's showing me customer details for Matt. All the stuff is coming over here like name, city, state, and country, email ID. So let's go ahead and see what exactly we need to do in order to get this result. Here in our customers.js file, till now what we have done is we have created the customers table, using which we are able to display the table data of all the customers that we have in our system. Now here you can see we have updated it a bit. So inside the render method, this is the first method that is being called. So it checks for loading state. If it's loading true, then it will show this one, and if it's loading set to false, then it will render the customers data. And here you can see we are passing the customers details, and then we are passing this as well. Next, what we have done is inside render customers table method, we have updated these two parameters over here as arguments, and then when we are clicking on this edit button, this is what exactly happening. So on click, we are assigning a method called edit customer. Now here you will notice that we are using CTRL or control parameter. Here we are passing control, and using this particular control we are actually creating this edit customer, because this particular method renders as an AJAX call. So we'll have to keep track of this argument that we have passed, and over here this is converted as a control parameter, CTRL. So we are saying control.edit customer, and then we are passing this particular customer as an argument over here. Now once you click on the edit button, this method gets called edit customer. So this is all that we are doing in edit customer. What we are doing for now is we are setting the state as current set to this customer and editing set to true. Now you will notice that the state that we had earlier now also includes a current object. Currently it's set to string, but later when we'll be editing it, we'll be converting it to an object type. For this lecture, let's consider it as a string variable. So here we have this current, and then we are setting this current as an object, which we are getting as a parameter over here in edit customer parameter. As soon as this set state gets called, the editing value is set to true. And when this happens, the render method gets called again. Now this time it is going to execute this particular piece of code. So it is going to check whether editing is set to true or false. If it is set to true, then this is going to render this particular method, that is customers.render current customer. Now render current customer takes the current customer that we have clicked on, and here inside this method you can see we are passing that particular customer. Now this is again generating a table, but this time it is for a single user. So the name of the user will appear over here as customer details, and then you'll have to closely monitor a couple of things over here. The first paragraph that we have has this value customer ID, which we will be using to send back to the server to update the particular customer. And here the other paragraph tags that we have are for name, city, state, country, email. You will also notice that we have given respective names to these text boxes. Like for name, we have name, city, state, country, and email. After this, you will also notice we have this onChange event. This is required because as soon as we will make the changes, the attributes will be updated, and this onChange event is required. If you remove this, the error message will appear and it will ask you to provide either onChange event or mark these input fields as read only. So here, as we are editing, we will have to provide onChange event, and you can see that onChange event, we are saying that customer name should be whatever we are entering into this particular text box, and this gets from this value, this.target.event.value. And the same thing has been repeated, as you can see, for every other input type. It's just the attribute keeps on changing. So here it's for name, then next one we have for city, similarly for state, country, and email. So once you have created this particular component, this will be rendered in the render method as content. So now, as you can see here, let's click on customers and you'll get the list over here. Now if I click on Matt, you'll notice the details of Matt is being populated over here. And the next one, we'll see how we can send this data back to the server and update it. In this lecture, we'll be taking a look at how to update data. So the first thing that we have changed over here, if you notice, is default value. So instead of value, we have taken default value. The reason why we have done so, because when we were using value and onChange event, the form was coming up as a read-only form, and that was preventing us from entering a new value. In order to resolve that, we have updated it to default value. Next, over here on onChange event, you will notice a slight difference. Basically, earlier we were saying target.event.value, which was incorrect. Here we have rectified that as well. So we are now saying event.target.value, and the same goes for all the properties or fields that we have over here. Lastly, on this form, you will notice that we have included a button which is having this update data method, and this is taking a parameter customer, and once this object is passed, we will be sending this back to the server. So here, if I take you to the update data method, you'll notice that this is the customer object that we are passing. We're just logging it into the console to see whether the values are updated or not. And here we are saying this dot set state loading set to true. So this is basically sending the data to the server, and that's why we have the loading screen. Now here we are using the fetch API to send the data to the server, and for that we have created one more method called update customer under customer controller. Here you can see we are using the post method, and these are some of the header requests that we need to send, like accept the data as application JSON and content type as application JSON. Finally, we are using json.stringify to convert this customer object and send it as the body of the post request. And once that's done, we are setting the loading state back to false. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the update method. So here we have the update customer method. It is taking this customer object which is coming from the body, and then we are just taking the connection string, creating a SQL connection object, and here you can see we have created a SQL command, opened it up, and then we are sending these parameters to the stored procedure that we have created, ASP update customer, and finally we are returning true. Now here, this is the stored procedure that we have created. ASP update customer, customer ID, name, address, city, state, country, email. These are the things that we are passing. And here you can see we are writing the update query, update customer, set name, address, city, state, country, email to the respective variables that we have passed to this stored procedure. And then we are saying where customer ID is equal to @customer ID. So once we have this ready, we can go ahead and execute this application now. And here you can see the form is coming up. Now let's go ahead and edit this Matt. So here we'll say Matt, and then you can specify Utah as the address and click on update customer. As soon as it'll do that, you can see the parameters are now coming up over here. State is updated as Utah. Rest of the other thing is exactly like that. And You can just go ahead and proceed now, and you can see Utah is coming up. This has been updated successfully, and if I have to see the output, you can see over here under state, it's now being updated as Utah. So that's how easy it is to edit a record using ASP.NET Core and React template. Now in this one, we'll be taking a look at how to add a new customer in our database using the single page application that we are creating. So the first thing that we will be doing is introducing a new state variable, and here we're calling it as new as a new customer, and initial value is set to false. After that, what we have done is inside the render method, if you see, we have introduced a new button, and this is basically going to call a function called new customer. Now in order to call this new customer function, the first thing that we need to do is inside our constructor we need to bind this. So we are saying this.newCustomer equals this.newCustomer.bind this, and then here we have defined the new customer, and all it is doing is setting the value of new to true, and the current customer is now initialized with an empty object of customer with customer ID 0 and every other thing over here as name, city, state, country, email. And once that's done, you'll notice inside the render function we have this check which sees whether the new is set to true or not. So when we have clicked on this button, we will be coming inside this, and here we're calling the same old function render current customer. Now render current customer has been updated a little bit. You'll notice that the button click now says save customer instead of update customer, because we'll be using the same form to update the data as well as insert a new customer. Now this is going to call update data with the customer object. So here inside update data, we have now also renamed the controller method as save user, so it covers both the aspect of adding as well as updating, and the rest of the stuff remains same. And inside the controller, you'll notice we have not changed anything at all except the save customer name. And inside this SP update customer stored procedure, we have updated it. So now if the customer ID is greater than 0, we are doing the update. Otherwise, we are simply inserting the record over here. And you can see that customer ID is not provided because customer ID is auto incremented over here. So as soon as a new record will be inserted, the customer ID will be updated on its own. Now let's go ahead and run this to see it in action. Now we'll be clicking on the customers link, and here you can see all the customers are coming up. Let's go ahead and click on new customer. So we have the empty form, and now let's go ahead and enter some values, and you can see that we have entered a new customer called Tom. And now let's go ahead and click on save customer. So here you can see the breakpoint has hit, and let's check the customer object that has been passed, and over here you can see every other thing is coming up properly and the customer ID is set to 0. Now let's execute this, and then we'll check whether it has been inserted into the system or not. So here we'll go back to our customer, and there we have Tom inserted into our database, and here we can see it as well on the customer list. So that's how easy it is to insert a new record using our ASP.NET Core React template single page application. In this lecture, we'll be taking a look at how we can publish our single page application. Now that we have covered how to create a customer, how to update a customer, how to list the customers, I would like you to practice how to delete and search customers. So that is an exercise for you all, and here we'll see how we can publish our single page application. So the first thing that you need to do is just go to solution, select the project over here, SPA, and then go to build, and here you'll find publish, and then the name of your project will appear. So when you'll click on that, you'll be presented with this screen. Now here you can just click on start to proceed with the publishing, and once you do that, you'll see various options coming up. For instance, you have Azure App Services. You can install it on App Service Linux, Azure Virtual Machines, IIS, FTP, etc., and then a folder. So here, when you say folder, it is going to put this path by default, that has been release Net Core 2.2 publish. Now inside this directory, we'll be publishing our application. So we'll say create profile, and here you can see the name is coming as folder profile. So you can just go ahead and rename this. So instead of folder profile, you can say publish local and click on save. Just give it a meaningful name, that's all. And then you can just go ahead and click on publish. Here you have few options as well. It says delete existing file. I would recommend doing that. So inside file publish options, you can go and select delete all existing files prior to publish. Click on save, and that's pretty much it that you need to do. After this, just click on publish. And here you can see it has started the publish process now. Once the build process is completed, you will notice over here that the status says web app was published successfully, and here the message is also coming up. As you can see, it assumes that the project was built, assuming it is hosted at the server root. You can control this with the homepage field in your package.json file. And here's example is being provided, and it further says that the build folder is ready to be deployed, and you can serve it with a static server using serve-s build, and you can find more information about it over here. So now let's go ahead and check out the directory. So click on this link by pressing the control button and mouse left click, and here you go. This is the app that has been generated. You can see all the DLLs. The project DLL itself is there, and runtime configuration, web.config file, package log.json, app settings.json, dependency.json, and then inside the client app directory you have the build, and then static and every other related file, which includes service worker, manifest, index, and inside static you'll find CSS and JS file. So that's how easy it is to create single page application using ASP.NET Core and React.js template.